The marauder screamed into the radio, voice cracking with panic, as the red mist of his comrade still hung in the air like cursed confetti. He took off Grix's entire head from 4 miles out. He's not even real. We took his spotter, and he's still. A high-caliber round shattered the speaker mid-sentence, ending his life before the words could finish echoing through the dust-choked valley. Somewhere in the distance, cloaked in brush and silence, White Feather blinked once behind his scope and muttered calmly, "You shouldn't have taken my brother." 12 hours earlier, the infamous crew of Galactic Marauders were having what they'd later call the dumbest brilliant idea of their lives. Captain Roger Flux, all muscle, smirk, and tragic decision-making, paced around their temporary base like a lion in a neon-painted jungle gym. The outlaw crew had finally captured Ellis Rain, a sharp-witted, sarcastic recon specialist known for being glued to the hip of a ghost. Not just any ghost. The sniper called White Feather. The man whose reputation across the stars had become so exaggerated that bar stories claimed he once shot the wings off a fly from orbit, blindfolded, drunk, and on a different moon. But the Marauders weren't interested in myth. They were interested in leverage. And Ellis, currently tied to a cargo crate and loudly insulting his captors, was supposedly the key. "Oh, come on," Ellis said with theatrical boredom. "You're telling me this is the legendary Flux? The slayer of 17 battlefields? You smell like expired cheese and ego." Flux grinned, revealing gold teeth and a general lack of patience. "Your mouth's gonna get real quiet when your friend comes crawling to save you. Snipers always need their spotters." "You're assuming I need him to save me," Ellis said. "I was actually just wondering how many IQ points your crew shares between them. Is it more or less than a sandwich?" Behind Flux, a marauder named Grunt choked on laughter and was immediately pistol-whipped for the crime. The room fell silent until the power flickered, which shouldn't have happened since they were running on an isolated core. Flux narrowed his eyes. Outside, the sky was a canvas of storm clouds and pulsing moons. Somewhere out there, White Feather was listening. That was the thing about Jace Rain, known to enemies as White Feather. He never responded immediately. He waited, not out of hesitation, but calculation. Killing wasn't his job. It was his rhythm. Every target was a note in his symphony. Every breath he took behind the scope part of the final crescendo. And right now he wasn't angry. He was exact. Lying prone beneath the high cliffs that bordered the Marauder base, Jace had already measured every exit, every wall thickness, every known troop route, and every wind draft down to the vibration. His rifle wasn't just a weapon. It was an extension of what the galaxy had forced him to become. A survivor, a protector, a shadow. Ellis's capture wasn't a surprise. Jace had seen it coming 3 days earlier when their recon path was rerouted by falsified signals. He let it happen, not because he didn't care, but because this mission needed proof of what the Marauders were hiding. And now he had it. A signal intercepted during the night revealed Flux wasn't just looting. He was selling alien weapons to Syndicate forces who'd use them to destabilize entire colonies. Jace didn't want revenge. He wanted proof. But now, with Ellis being used as bait, his patience had started its slow, final countdown. Back in the base, Ellis played his part perfectly. He never stopped talking. He insulted cooking, fashion, and the way the Marauders styled their shoulder pads. He dropped fake coordinates for sniper nests. Within an hour, 5 men were dead from sniper fire, all due to Ellis's convincing lies. That was their bond. Even from miles apart, the Rain brothers operated like a team. One whispered. The other struck. Flux, to his credit, began realizing the mistake. He'd expected a furious, reckless assault. Instead, he got silent, surgical slaughter. His men were now running from shadows, flinching at every reflective surface. One tried to quit and got a bullet through the kneecap before he made it 10 steps. There wasn't even an echo, just a wet crunch and screaming. That night, Ellis stared up at the flickering ceiling and smiled to himself. He'd seen the signs. The missing guard. The misfired shot that broke a camera just before it caught him planting a bug. The frequency hop in the intercom that only Jace could have triggered. He was close. Close enough to kill. Captain Flux stormed into the holding cell with blood on his boots and madness in his eyes. "You think this is funny?" Ellis smirked. "A little. Also mildly arousing." Flux slammed a fist into the wall beside him. "You'll both die. This sniper of yours, he's just a man." Ellis leaned forward. "That's the part that should scare you. He is just a man. And you've made him angry." Across the ridge, Jace repositioned to higher ground. His fingers adjusted the scope with a calmness most people reserve for tea ceremonies or euthanasia. He marked a set of marauders patrolling near the landing bay. 3 headshots. Wind slight left. Elevation 2 ticks down. Pull. Bodies dropped before the echo of the first shot arrived. The panic that erupted in the marauder camp was operatic. Lights dimmed. Sirens wailed. Men started yelling over each other. Flux barked orders while shooting his own PA system in rage. The ship's AI, confused and offended, locked the base doors as a security measure. No one got out. Jace sent a single message across an encrypted line. Just 2 words, "You moved." Ellis, pretending to nap, burst into laughter. The guard beside him flinched. "You all right?" the guard asked, clearly unsettled. "I'm just picturing what your life insurance policy says under Acts of God," Ellis said. "Because White Feather. He's about to rewrite that clause." In a hidden ridge far above, Jace Rain blinked again. Calculations were done. Wind was steady. Distance, 3.84 miles. Target, primary comms relay. 1 shot would sever all outbound transmissions. He exhaled. Time to begin. The chaos didn't subside. If anything, it multiplied like rats on fire. The remaining marauders scrambled across the compound, knocking over crates and each other in a panic frenzy. Flux had lost 4 more men in the last hour, each death more theatrical than the last. One had his helmet implode. Another was shot through the hand as he raised it to wipe his sweat. They weren't being hunted. They were being studied, dismantled, and discarded. And worst of all, they knew it. Captain Roger Flux kicked open the door to the command room, his boots clanging on metal. His teeth gritted so hard it sounded like a rock grinder chewing steel. He slammed his hand on the map table, projecting a hollow layout of the compound, and screamed at the tech specialist. "Find me his position. Now. Use heat, seismic, sonar. I don't care if you use black magic. Just find him before he turns me into a memory." The tech flinched and stammered something about sniper ghosting patterns and dampening zones, none of which helped. Meanwhile, outside, the men had started debating whether hugging walls actually made them safer, or if they should simply dig holes and live in them. One even claimed he saw White Feather in a reflective spoon and almost shot himself in the foot trying to escape it. Up on the ridge, White Feather lay still, perfectly still, a statue of vengeance wrapped in burlap and brush, breathing once every 20 seconds. His face was a canvas of quiet resolve. His eyes glued to the scope, observing, not acting. The marauders were no longer soldiers. They were prey. No formation, no discipline, just a bunch of screaming, armed meat running from shadows. Exactly where he wanted them. But something new stirred the board. A sudden encrypted signal hit his comms. It wasn't from Ellis. It wasn't from the marauders. It came from Orbital Relay. The signal header bore a Syndicate mark. Black Halo, a mercenary outfit known for being too expensive, too professional, and too morally bankrupt to care who paid them. White Feather knew their reputation. They didn't chase honor or revenge. They chased contracts. And if they were here, someone had offered a price. A high one. Down below, a ship landed silently in the east lot, its black hull gleaming like an oil spill. The marauders noticed but dared not approach. Even Flux watched from a distance. Black Halo didn't work with pirates. They tolerated them. And their leader, a calm, almost polite sociopath named Bishop Vale, stepped out flanked by 2 equally calm and even less polite subordinates. Vale approached Flux with a nod that felt more like a death threat than a greeting. "You've stirred quite the storm, Captain," he said, voice smooth and clinical. "The Syndicate received word of a rogue element on Dilharn V. The same element you promised was dead. Imagine our surprise when we saw the kill feed. Flux swallowed hard. He's just a man. Vale smirked, then gestured to a marauder currently crying in a fuel crate. That may be true, but your men are dying like flies, which means you were either lying to us or you're too incompetent to handle your own mess. White Feather watched the exchange through his scope. Interesting development. He knew the Syndicate wouldn't play nicely, but what he didn't expect was how quickly they'd turn their sights toward him. Within 10 minutes of landing, Black Halo's drones were scanning the cliffs. Not erratically like the Marauders, but methodically, like they were solving a puzzle. And worse, they were getting close. He'd have to move soon. Back in the holding room, Ellis Rain overheard bits of the new argument brewing between Flux and Vale. It was like watching a knife fight between two egos duct-taped to grenades. Ellis took the opportunity to stretch his legs. The bug he'd planted earlier was already feeding data to Jace, but now he needed something more direct. So he faked a coughing fit. Loud, theatrical, almost inspirational in its annoyance. One of the newer Marauders opened the door in confusion and hesitation, which was exactly the kind of stupidity Ellis relied on. Ellis lunged, grabbed the man's belt, and yanked out a small data drive before getting kicked backward and retied. But the job was done. The drive contained Syndicate targeting algorithms. With it, Jace could predict their scan patterns. Game back on. Outside, Jace crawled from his original nest, slinking through ravines and dry brush like a ghost with unfinished business. His mind processed the drone's paths, the temperature shifts, the likely interception zones. He whispered the numbers to himself. Wind 1.2 west. Distance 380. Shot delay 2 seconds after drone sweep. He reached a new position overlooking the comms tower. And waited. 2 minutes later, Vale's voice echoed through the entire base via the PA system. To the sniper known as White Feather, he said calmly, "We are not here to play games. You are a liability to multiple sectors and a stain on our operational integrity. Surrender now, and you will be taken alive. I am legally obligated to say this before we attempt to evaporate you from existence." Ellis chuckled from his corner. "That's cute. They think he's within hearing range." Jace heard it. But more importantly, he heard the crackle of a new target. The Syndicate's mobile relay station parked on the far side of the ridge. Destroying it would cripple their long-range comms and destabilize their tracking systems. But it was armored. Not enough to stop a shot, but enough to demand precision. He calibrated, took a breath, pulled the trigger. The relay didn't just explode. It erupted. An orange burst ripped through the sky, followed by a blackout across the Syndicate's drone grid. Drones dropped midair like robotic pigeons that forgot how to fly. Vale stared at the wreckage without flinching, then slowly turned toward Flux. "You failed. Again." Flux responded by throwing a chair through a wall and declaring that this was all a strategic retreat, which fooled no one, not even himself. Night fell harder than usual that cycle. The base lit up with panicked red lights, half the power gone, men yelling over each other, and Vale quietly preparing his next move. In the shadows, Jace whispered into his comm, "Ellis, tell me you got something." Ellis smiled and tapped the drive beneath his vest. "Oh, I got something. Let's crash their party." Jace smiled. The game had changed. They weren't just surviving now. They were about to go hunting. The silence after the explosion hung in the air like a dare. Even the dust hesitated to settle. The Syndicate drones, once dancing across the skyline in organized formation, now lay scattered like metal vultures hit by a meteor shower. One still sputtered weakly, trying to reboot, until Jace sent a low-caliber round through its optic with surgical indifference. Flux's compound, already a spiraling mess of panic and confusion, now became a full-blown circus without a ringleader. Lights blinked out, comms faltered, and soldiers ran around carrying their own paranoia like it was a live grenade. Inside the base, Vale stood in the remnants of his command node, his face unreadable as his subordinates attempted to re-establish control. He wasn't angry. Vale didn't process frustration like most people. Instead, he became calmer, quieter, more focused. That's what made him dangerous. He looked at the blown relay, the corpses of downed drones, and the Marauders scrambling to explain everything that had just happened. Then he said 3 words so calmly they might as well have been spoken at a tea party. "We escalate now." He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply turned and ordered the orbital pod released. A high-impact projectile, housing what the Syndicate called a neutralizer, a walking, genetically enhanced freak show built for one job only: finding the unfindable and killing it slowly. Jace Rain had just become priority 1. But while Vale was preparing to introduce him to their version of the devil, Jace had other plans. He was already inside the perimeter. Using the blackout window, Jace slipped through the southwest fence with the same ease a whisper slips through a confession booth. His movements were deliberate, silent, almost meditative. Every step, every turn, calculated for maximum stealth. He wore the shadows like a second skin. The chaos outside was the perfect cover for a man who didn't need much to disappear. He moved through storage corridors, dodging nervous guards, overhearing terrified chatter, and cataloging everything from troop movement to weapon stash locations. His goal wasn't murder. Not yet. His goal was his brother. Ellis had already begun his own escape plan. While most prisoners would have waited for a guard rotation or tried to pick a lock, Ellis took a more creative approach. He'd convinced one of the dumber Marauders that he had urgent digestive issues, resulting in a chaotic 15-minute argument about protocol, ethics, and whether a guy should be allowed to poop before execution. The guard, grossed out and confused, finally led him into the back corridor bathroom, which was exactly where Jace had just arrived. When Ellis stepped out of the stall and came face to face with a rifle barrel, he didn't flinch. He just grinned. "Took you long enough." Jace blinked once, emotion flickering like a shadow behind his eyes. Without a word, he handed Ellis a silenced pistol and motioned to move. The reunion was quiet, efficient, and loaded with the unspoken weight of everything they hadn't said in years. No apologies. No time. Just trust. They moved through the maze of the compound, ducking under faulty lighting and slipping through blind spots. Jace led, Ellis followed, each movement synchronized like they were born for this. Their past as a team kicked in like an instinctual rhythm. Jace disabled security panels, while Ellis downloaded comm records. Jace took out a guard with a tranquilizer dart to the neck, while Ellis stole a map from his belt. In 10 minutes, they had more intel than most full recon units pulled in a week. But things were never simple. A deep metallic roar echoed through the valley outside, rattling the windows and shaking the air itself. Jace froze. Ellis tensed. "That's new," Ellis whispered. Jace responded with something even more chilling. "That's Syndicate breathing heavy." The neutralizer had landed, and it was already moving. Back in the command room, Vale watched through low-light satellite feeds as the creature stomped through the terrain. A beast wrapped in armor, equipped with thermal, bio, and seismic tracking, its body enhanced with muscle-binding nanotissue that allowed it to run like a predator and hit like a demolition team. The Syndicate didn't use it often, only when the math said nothing else would work. Inside the compound, Jace and Ellis reached the control deck. It was mostly deserted, save for one engineer who was too busy stress-eating protein bars to notice 2 ghosts sliding past him. Ellis hacked into the mainframe, while Jace set up a short-range jammer. They needed 5 minutes to extract files proving Flux had been selling Syndicate tech to rebel warlords. The whole reason they started this mess. 5 minutes. They got 3. A wall crumpled near the northern bay door as the neutralizer stormed inside. Half beast, half machine. Its eyes scanned for targets with silent rage. Jace didn't hesitate. He grabbed Ellis, shoved him behind the mainframe stack, and raised his rifle. But he didn't fire. Not yet. The neutralizer was fast, too fast to waste a first shot. So he waited. The thing turned slowly, taking in the room, sniffing the air like it could smell fear. And maybe it could. It took 1 step forward. Then Ellis's watch beeped. A stupid, accidental alarm from a forgotten comm-sync. The creature roared, a guttural explosion of fury, and charged. Jace pushed Ellis aside and Dove left, rolling behind a control bench as claws tore through the wall where they had been. The rifle came up. Scope found target. Breath held. Shot fired. The bullet didn't kill it, but it staggered the beast, forcing it to regroup. Jace moved, fast, firing 3 more times, each shot placed for maximum disruption. Sparks flew from its side. Fluid leaked from a damaged joint. But it didn't fall. It adjusted, calculated, adapted. Ellis crawled to the control panel and yanked the data core just as the creature charged again. Jace planted an explosive mine and waited until the last second. When the neutralizer lunged, jaws wide, Jace dropped the mine at its feet and vaulted backward. The blast ripped through the chamber, sending cables, sparks, and parts of the creature flying. But the beast wasn't dead. It twitched, regenerated. Jace grabbed Ellis and ran. The compound erupted in screams as the damaged creature chased them through the halls. The brothers leapt over crates, ducked under rails, and finally slid through an emergency hatch that led back to the cliffs. Behind them, the neutralizer howled with something that sounded disturbingly like joy. As they reached the cliff edge, Jace pulled a flare from his pack and fired it straight into the night sky. It wasn't a call for help. It was a signal. They weren't running anymore. They were drawing it out. And this time, Jace wasn't planning to miss. The mountain wind howled as the Rain brothers crouched at the edge of a jagged cliff, breath fogging in the freezing air, the dark sky above them pulsing with occasional flashes of static lightning. Below, the Syndicate compound flickered with scattered fires and chaos, a wound in the landscape that bled noise and panic. Behind them, the neutralizer prowled somewhere in the ravines like a machine with unfinished business. Every step it took vibrated faintly through the rocks, a low reminder that it was still hunting. Jace sat still, scanning the terrain with a scope as Ellis tried to hack into the core files on the stolen data drive using a handheld decryptor no larger than a candy bar. Jace kept his eyes downrange, but his voice cut through the wind. "You blame me for leaving." Ellis didn't look up from the decryptor. It was a simple statement, not a question, and yet it cracked open years of silence. Jace waited. "You faked your death. You walked away from me like I was a loose thread," Ellis finally said. "You never even said goodbye. Just bang. Explosion. Empty casket." "I did it so you'd live," Jace said quietly. "They had a bounty on my name, Ellis. On you too. Every black market broker from here to Solaris Prime wanted us for ransom. I disappeared so they'd stop looking for both of us. You could have trusted me with that," Ellis muttered. "I would have helped." "You were 16 and still thought the galaxy played fair," Jay said. "I had to choose between being your brother and being your shield. I picked shield." For a long moment, they didn't speak. The decryptor beeped, signaling progress. A folder opened with internal comm logs, payment trails, weapon manifests. It was all there. Flux's trades with rebel warlords, deals signed under false flags, Syndicate gear sold to outlaws. It was enough to burn 3 criminal empires to the ground. "We upload this, we light half the system on fire," Ellis said. "And put a target on our backs the size of a capital ship," Jace replied. "Sounds like old times," Ellis said with a grin. The sound of a distant footfall echoed up the cliff. Not a step. A crater. Then another. Jace froze, pulled his scope, and scanned the path behind them. The neutralizer emerged from the treeline like a god forged in steel and rage, its eyes glowing with thermal heat sensors, limbs adjusting with mechanical precision. It had tracked them by seismic footprint. It was learning. Jace raised his rifle, but he already knew it wouldn't be enough. Not alone. The last blast only slowed it down. It had adapted. A headshot might stall it. A direct hit to the joint might disable a limb. But the thing was made to survive worse than this. Jay stood up and backed toward the ledge. "We're out of time," he said. Ellis pulled the core and slung the drive pack over his shoulder. "We going off the edge?" Jace nodded. "We let it chase us. Then we cut back around and draw it into the crater field on the west ridge. Old mines are still active. We use the terrain. So basically we outrun a murder robot across a minefield and hope our boots remember where solid ground is," Ellis said. "Exactly," Jace replied. "Now, jump." They leapt together, rolling as they hit the lower ledge, sliding down loose shale and snow into a narrow pass. The neutralizer roared from above and followed, not even hesitating as it smashed through rock and tree like they were paper. The chase was on. It moved faster than anything its size should have. A beast wrapped in code and armor, propelled by the kind of hate only machines could learn. The terrain became a blur. Snow blasted sideways. Old roots cracked beneath their feet. Jace took the lead, guiding them through landmarks he'd scouted days before. Behind them, the neutralizer smashed through obstacles like an avalanche with a mission. It was closing the distance. They had 30 seconds at most before it caught up. Jace turned sharply toward a gap in the ridge, Ellis on his heels. The path narrowed into a ravine lined with blue markers, old Syndicate minefield indicators. Most people thought the area was cleared. Jace knew better. He'd reactivated the pressure mines 2 nights ago, just in case. As they reached the center of the ravine, Jace turned and slid behind a boulder, pulling Ellis with him. The neutralizer burst into view, running at full speed. Jace waited. Not yet. Not yet. The creature hit the 3rd blue marker. Now, he fired one shot. The bullet struck a rock embedded with a modified sensor node. The mine chain detonated in a perfect sequence, light blooming in violent bursts across the ravine, like warfire in fast forward. The neutralizer was caught mid-stride. For a second, it disappeared in flame and earth. Silence. Then it climbed out of the crater, burned, sparking, missing half an arm, but still alive. It howled, less like a machine, and more like a wounded predator that just discovered pain. It's mad now, Ellis said. It was mad before, Jace replied. Now it's desperate. They ran again, ducking into a collapsed cave mouth just as the thing opened fire from its shoulder mount. Shards of plasma tore through the cliff wall above them. They dove into the darkness, breath ragged, the heat of the blast chasing them like a second wind of death. Inside, the cave echoed with their footsteps, the walls shaking from each step of the creature outside. The end of the tunnel split in two. Jay stopped. We split up. You take the core, head to the uplink tower. Broadcast everything. I'll keep this thing busy. No way, Ellis said. You're not doing the hero bit again. This isn't a movie, Jay said. It's probability math. One of us runs and lives. The other stalls and maybe lives. Both stay and we both die. Ellis stared at him, then handed over the core. You broadcast it, he said. I'll draw the monster. Let's see how well it handles sarcasm under pressure. Jace hesitated, then nodded. See you soon, little brother. Ellis ran left. Jace ran right. The creature tore through the entrance seconds later and chose its direction based on heat trail. It followed Jace, just like he planned. The last thing Jace saw before rounding the bend was Ellis looking back once. Then he was gone into the dark, alone again, but not for long. The echo of the neutralizer's footsteps vibrated through the cave walls, each one louder than the last. Jace moved silently, his back pressed to the cold stone, his breathing shallow. He could hear the creature's low growl as it hunted him, its heavy limbs crashing against the cave floor. There was no hiding now. The creature was too close. The pressure mines had done their job, slowed it down, but the thing wasn't just a machine. It was a predator. It was learning, and it was learning fast. Jace took another step, his boots silent on the dirt floor. He reached for the detonator strapped to his belt. His hand hesitated. He was close, so close to drawing the creature into the final trap. His heart hammered against his ribs, his mind calculating the next move, but one thought kept slipping through the cracks, Ellis. He couldn't shake the image of his brother running down that dark tunnel, disappearing into the shadows. Ellis had always been the one to keep going, the one to run into danger with a grin, with no hesitation. Jace had always been the one to protect, but now it was Ellis who was out there, and he had to hope that his little brother had done his part. The sound of the neutralizer's growl grew louder. The cave shook as the creature advanced, and Jace took another step, edging closer to the cliffside. His eyes scanned the shadows, looking for any sign of movement, any shift in the air that might betray the creature's location. And then there it was. A massive shape filled the entrance, filling the entire tunnel with its hulking form. It was upon him in an instant, its glowing red eyes searching the darkness. Jace didn't wait. He pressed the button on the detonator. A series of explosions detonated, not from a mines, but from a series of charges Jace had set over the last few hours. The sound of the blast echoed like thunder through the caves, the ground shaking beneath Jace's feet as rocks and debris rained down around him. The neutralizer let out a roar, the sound deafening in the confined space. The explosion had done its job, severely damaging the creature's torso and right leg, but it didn't stop. It never stopped. Jace dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the snap of the creature's clawed hand as it swung toward him. He rolled and came up on one knee, his rifle already in his hands. The neutralizer lunged again, its mouth opening wide, ready to tear Jace apart. But Jace was faster. He fired twice, once, twice, hitting the creature square in the chest. The creature staggered back, but it didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. It simply adjusted its stance and roared once more. Jace swore under his breath. It wasn't enough. He needed more. The neutralizer was a machine, designed to take a beating and keep fighting. He had to outsmart it. He had to lead it into the heart of the cave, into the final trap. He couldn't let it continue. If he did, it would hunt them both down. He had to finish it now. He ran, weaving through the cave, leading the creature deeper into the tunnels. Behind him, he could hear it charging, its heavy steps shaking the ground. Jace didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew it was coming. He'd planned for this. He had only one chance. At the far end of the cave, the tunnel opened up into a vast, craggy cavern. Jace skidded to a stop and turned, setting himself in position behind a pile of rocks. He knew the creature would follow. It was relentless. It would be right behind him. And when it got close enough, he waited. The sound of the neutralizer's footsteps grew louder, closer. He could hear its breath, a low, mechanical growl, almost like it was savoring the hunt. The vibrations in the ground told him it was almost there. He didn't have much time. His hand tightened on the detonator. One final push. One final moment. And then it happened. The neutralizer came into view, its massive frame filling the entrance of the cavern. Jace didn't hesitate. He hit the button. The entire cavern erupted with explosions. Mines, hidden traps, and the remaining charges detonated all at once. The earth cracked and buckled as the neutralizer was thrown into the air, its massive body slamming into the cavern walls with a deafening crash. Rocks and debris filled the air, blocking Jace's vision. He shielded his face from the blast, coughing as dust and smoke filled the cavern. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the silence was shattered by the creature's roar. It was still alive. Jace didn't waste time. He sprinted forward, rifle raised, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the neutralizer struggling to rise from the rubble. Its limbs were bent at odd angles, one of its legs completely shattered, but it was still trying to move, still trying to fight. Jace didn't hesitate. He aimed for its exposed core, the weak spot he had identified earlier. The moment the creature lifted its head to glare at him, Jace fired. The shot hit its central processor, sending a shockwave of sparks and electricity through the creature's body. The neutralizer let out a final, agonized scream as it collapsed to the ground, its massive form twitching violently before falling still. Jace stood over it, breathing heavily, his body shaking from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had done it. It was over. But there was no time to savor the victory. The neutralizer's destruction had triggered a chain reaction. The cave was beginning to collapse. Rocks were falling from above, the entire cavern groaning, as if it were about to give way to the earth beneath it. Jace turned and ran toward the exit. He didn't know where Ellis was, but he knew one thing. He had to find him. The blast had shaken the entire complex. The cave might not hold much longer. Ellis. Jace shouted, his voice echoing through the cavern. Ellis, where are you? He heard nothing in response, just the crashing of falling rocks and the rumbling of the collapsing cave. But then, as Jace neared the mouth of the tunnel, he saw a figure. a shape darting through the dust and debris. Ellis. His brother's face appeared from the smoke, his expression filled with relief and exhaustion. Without saying a word, Ellis sprinted toward Jace, and together they ran out of the collapsing cave. Behind them, the mountain groaned and fell apart, the sound of the destruction a symphony of chaos. They reached the edge of the cliff and looked out over the valley. The fires were still burning, the remnants of the Syndicate's operation now nothing but smoldering ruins. But for the first time in what felt like forever, they were alive. And together. "We did it," Ellis said, his voice hoarse but full of something close to triumph. "We're not done yet," Jace replied, his gaze scanning the horizon. "There's always more." But for now they were together, and that was enough.